Yeah, so when we talk about the food supply chain, the hotels serving these meals are tied into that, right? And so they're having to source it. And what happened during the pandemic is a lot of people had to change their typical sourcing strategies and become more local because the big packers closed and they couldn't even source the product coming out of there. So because it wasn't available, they shifted their purchasing habits and went to a more localized system. And that's what we're building because that is a stable food supply. If you're sourcing your food from within your community and you know your farmer and rancher, you're always going to have access.
All right, AJ. I'm going to take a little bit of a left turn from what I'm usually covering, but I think it's an important topic. I've heard you speak on it, and I actually bumped into you on LinkedIn, which I was pleasantly surprised to see conversations about food supply, and you're connected to regenerative farmers, ranchers on LinkedIn. And I was like, hey, this is really good stuff because food supply is important. Mm-hmm. And I find it fascinating, the challenges that consumers have, that ranchers, farmers have with regard to producing food. And so why don't we start off with, why don't you tell us what problem you have set out to solve?
Our food security. We've got COVID highlighted a broken food supply chain very clearly. And frankly, I've been in this space for a while and watching, and nobody has done anything to fix it since COVID. And so that's just what I've set out to do.
And so describe exactly what's happened over the years. I know that your family's been in ranching for a while, and it's changed over the past 50 years. And there's only a handful of companies controlling the food supply. And then I even question the quality of, like if we just keep it to meat, the quality of meat coming from those companies, in my opinion, can be very questionable. And you probably know more than I do, of course. But talk to us about that a little bit.
Yeah. So, the system is currently set up for as fast of production as possible, right? Because they can take an animal at 6 months to a year old and have it ready for slaughter in 18 months. And in order to do that, they have to feed that animal a diet that's going to rapidly put weight onto the carcass. And those methods are not always the most healthy for the animal. And the phrase, we are what we eat. And so, the scientific data is out now where they measure the nutrient density, phytonutrients, essential amino acids, and omega-3 to 6 ratios in our meat supply. And when an animal is given a primary diet of corn and grain to finish, they're high in omega-6s, which from the COVID pandemic, we knew that inflammation in the body was the highest cause of comorbidity for people. And they were more likely to die of COVID with a high omega-6 ratio in their body. That's coming from the corn and grain. It's in the meat, and that's how we ended up getting it in our bodies. A grass-finished animal, and there is a difference between grass-finished and regenerative. Regenerative actually provides multiple species of grasses that actually drops the omega-6s, increases omega-3s, and all the essential amino acids and so forth. So that's where the health issues are with the meat we have, is the diet they're eating translates into what we eat, and then it affects our bodies.
And, again, most of my audience are hotels. And there's a reason I wanted to speak with you because, hotels are probably getting their food supply from just a handful of providers that are getting it from even fewer handful of providers.
Right.
And it's not the best quality. And as you mentioned at the beginning, the supply can be cut off just immediately. And I've actually, it's not even funny, but I've heard predictions, the next pandemic expected to be in the food supply.
Yes.
And so if you're a conspiracy theorist, you might be a little panicky. But, just generally speaking, for, a hotel, a high-end hotel that's got a really nice restaurant, or a couple of eating venues on a resort, I mean, this could be a problem, but it could also be an opportunity to communicate to their guests that, I mean, we're providing you the best meal possible. And, I think that's important. I mean, yeah, I don't know if, so I tell you what, why don't you describe your solution, and then maybe we can connect the dots a little bit more because I know you're primarily working with producers and consumers, but maybe go that way with us.
Yeah. So when we talk about the food supply chain, the hotels serving these meals are tied into that, right? And so they're having to source it. And what happened during the pandemic is a lot of people had to change their typical sourcing strategies and become more local because the big packers closed and they couldn't even source the product coming out of there. So because it wasn't available, they shifted their purchasing habits and went to a more localized system. And that's what we're building, because that is a stable food supply. If you're sourcing your food from within your community and your farmer and rancher, you're always going to have access. In addition to that, on the health side, you can have conversations with them. Now, listen, I'm not here to vilify corn and grain because those are great tasting steaks. That's just the facts. And on the regenerative side, you can get a really great tasting piece of meat and have the health value from it, but also meet your local producers. And if you're in a hotel chain, there are producers around every hotel throughout the country. And so what we're building is a network to be able to connect consumers directly with the source so they don't have to deal with broken supply chain issues, which creates food stability for everybody where they're at, including the ability for a hotel to secure the meat it needs to serve its customers. But then in addition to that, you move into the regenerative space, and you're going to start hearing this phrase a lot more over the next couple of years. That's going to give them access to high quality, nutrient dense meat. But then that also goes further into the food security side, because the corn being fed to the cattle in the feedlots is being sourced typically away from where those cattle are raised. Whereas in a regenerative model, you're feeding that animal with what you're raising right there on your own ranch or in that same town. So that just even goes deeper into the security of the food supply chain. Our inputs for producers went way up with the war going on in Russia and Ukraine. Fertilizer, lots of fertilizer comes out of Russia, and a lot of grain came out of the UK, or out of Ukraine, excuse me. And so that's an unstable supply chain as well. And so we're talking about hitting both nutrient dense food to feed Americans and a stable supply chain, because at the end of the day, we need to stop importing the volume of beef that we are and take care of our local producers first. We're losing 17,000 ranchers a year because they can't afford to be in business. And that's being replaced with beef from Paraguay, from South Africa, from Brazil. We just shouldn't be doing that. We're farming out our food supply chain and our food security as Americans, and we shouldn't do that.
Yeah, and I heard you mentioned, I don't know if it was Paraguay or not, but I mean, there's problems. There has been historically, there has been problems with that meat in particular, right?
Yeah, foot and mouth disease specifically came from Paraguay once before. Now, they might have mitigated it, but that's just a much smaller part of this whole issue, right? Like, here's the thing. We have more regulations in the U.S. when it comes to the USDA as a USDA processing facility, which I'm actually at right now, than foreign entities that are importing beef. We have to jump through more hoops in the U.S. with our USDA than foreign entities do before they ship it over. Then we can get into labeling issues. If we import beef from any other country, it comes in on a ship, right? And then it gets cut up into a packing house here, and they put a label on it that says product of the USA. Yeah. And consumers have no idea. Yeah. So when we talk about, then you've got all these people screaming that cows are the problem and it's causing climate change, which is also a bunch of BS, because it's not the cow. Actually, cows, ruminating animals, are the only solution for a desertifying environment. The problem is, one super tanker in the ocean emits as much emissions as 40,000 cars on the highway. Yeah. And we're importing millions of pounds of beef. So it's not the cow, it's the how.
Again, wellness is all the talk within hotels. and you want to talk about, and it's not just spas
Yeah.
and whirlpools and stuff like that. I mean,
Mhm.
this is the basic. If you can go to a nice hotel and they're promoting a highly nutritional, the best of the best food ingredients, I mean, that is appealing, and that's what you're doing. So what you're doing is you're bringing. So talk to about the technology side of it, which I'm
Yeah.
not sure if it's built yet, but talk to us about that.
So the technology is being built. We started it about a month ago. It spent 3 years understanding how to fix the problem before we started building the tech, because we needed to know what the solution looked like first. So if you're familiar with, maybe a dirty word in your industry, but if you're familiar with Airbnb, it's a short-term rental platform, right? But it's the easiest way for me to describe this. So you open up this platform and it shows you all the short-term rentals in the area that you want to be. In our case, you'll open up the platform and it'll show you all of the local food growers where you're at. So we're going to cut out all the middlemen. You have to have a packing house to cut it and wrap it for you. But dairy, produce, we're starting with meat. It's the industry I know. But the customer will open this software. It shows everybody around them growing food. They can then filter what it is they're looking for specifically. All the little bubbles disappear. If I'm looking for a house with a jacuzzi, everything disappears except for a house with a jacuzzi. So the customer can filter the software. Then they can connect with them directly, learn about the family. People want to know who's growing their food. So we're going to highlight the people, and then they'll see the inventory available. They can complete the entire transaction on the platform. The producer gets a notification that they've sold a box of beef, and then they coordinate pickup. The app will do all this, but it'll coordinate either shipping, localized pickup, or a designated meeting location to pick it up. But it's going back to what our communities used to do. I knew who my farmer was. I knew who my rancher was. So then I had that direct access, and we all supported each other. We tried homesteading at my home, and we were trying to do it all ourselves. That's too much. I should be focused on the chickens. My neighbor's taking care of the dairy. My other neighbor's taking care of the beef. And then together we support each other. And that's what a stable food system looks like.
Yeah. So what's the ETA on this platform?
We'll have our MVP up by the end of the year. It's going to be launched primarily in Utah, but really the Rocky Mountain West. I know the people there. I'm connected with the producers. After we work out any bugs, we'll scale it out nationwide. So by February, March, it'll be a nationwide service.
Now, meanwhile, one of the other things that I noticed that's connected to you is feedthepeoplebythepeople.com, right?
Yeah. That's our messaging platform. What I recognized early on is the people that aren't going to line up to eat bugs are the patriots. So that's just the fact. So I'm going out to who our people are. The patriots are also the ones doing the ranching, people who believe in our country and there's still something of value to fight for. And so feed the people, buy the people. Of course, it's a play on we the people.
Yeah.
And if you notice, if you go look at the website, feedthepeoplebythepeople.com, it's a rancher on horseback carrying a flag, and the flag is upside down. If you look at the code, the U.S. code for what that means, it means distress and loss of life or property, and we are there.
Yep.
That's absolutely where we're at. I am happy to flip that flag around when we change it, but right now, people need to understand that we're under attack. Our food supply chain is under direct attack by. I don't think there's an evil Mr. Burns sitting at his desk, but what it is it's the job of a CEO is to grow revenue for his company, and so all they're looking at is profits, not the downstream consequences. And so that's what's happening. We're fighting just almost this AI that's designed just to bring in profit or revenue for its shareholders. Be damned the consequences for everybody else.
Right. So is that the best place for any consumer or hotelier to keep track of your progress?
Yeah, absolutely. If they go there, they can definitely keep track there. There's an email list they can sign up for. We'll be sending out updates on when the software is coming out. So if you are a hotel chain and you're looking to source locally, we are working with some people that are focused on the commercial side of that so they can aggregate larger volumes. So if you're a big hotel chain, I'm working with some really intelligent people on the larger scale side that they can make sure, somebody working at the hotel chain, it'll be too complicated for them to call for every single hotel across the nation versus this group that we're going to tie into where they can source it one place and it gets to them to simplify it. In order to change the system we've got to make it convenient for both the producer and the consumer because that's what we've been trained to have. And that's what our tech's designed to do.
Perfect. Well, I want to thank you for joining me, AJ.
Thank you, Jason.
You bet.